wagons and secure the fair maid he required. That, at least, had been their plan. Matters, however, hadn't fallen out quite as they'd supposed. Tristan Weems had stumbled across his bride while overseeing the refurbishment of the house that was now the Bastion Club. Shortly after, Tony Blake had even more literally stumbled across his bride along with a dead body. Charles St. Austell, fleeing the capital and his two helpful female relatives, had found his bride haunting his ancestral home. And now Jack was fleeing the capital too, but not because of female relatives. The rattle of carriage wheels reached him. Through the screening drifts, he glimpsed a black carriage bowling along the road from Cherrington. The carriage crossed the junction with the Tetbury Lane down which Jack was descending, and continued west toward Nailsworth. Jack wondered who the carriage belonged to, but he'd been away so long he had no idea who might be visiting whom these days. On returning permanently to England, he'd had to decide which of his responsibilities to attend to first. He was an only child. His father's death had set Avening in his lap, with no one else to watch over it. But he knew the estate from the ground up. He'd been born and raised there, in this green valley on the northwest slope of the Cotswolds. Avening had been in sound hands. He trusted Griggs as his father had. Much more pressing had been the need to come to grips with the varied investments and far-flung properties he'd entirely unexpectedly inherited from his great-aunt Sophia. His mother had been the daughter of an earl, and his father the grandson of a duke. An eccentric spinster, great-aunt Sophia had been a twig somewhere on his paternal family tree. Her hobby had been amassing wealth. Although Jack could only recall meeting her briefly twice, on her death 2 years ago, great-aunt Sophia had willed a sizable portion of her amassed wealth to him. By the time he'd returned to England, various decisions associated with that inheritance had grown urgent. Learning about his new holdings and investments had been imperative. He'd duly suppressed a deep-seated longing to return to Avening, to reassure himself it was all as he remembered, that after all his years away, after all he'd had to do, witness and endure, his home was still there as he remembered it, and instead had devoted the last 6 months to coming to grips with his inheritance, welding the whole into one workable estate. Although he now owned numerous elegant country houses, to him, Avening was still the centrepiece, the place that was home, the place that held his heart. That was why he was there, slowly ambling down the lane, letting his jaded senses absorb the achingly familiar sights and sounds, letting them soothe his abraded temper, his less than contented mood, and the dull but persistent ache in his head. Temper and mood were due to his failure to find a suitable bride. He'd accepted he should, and had bitten the bullet. While in London organising his inheritance, he'd applied himself to looking over the field. Once the season had commenced, he'd assumed suitable ladies would be thick on the ground. Wasn't that what Marriage Mart was all about? Instead, he'd discovered that while sweet and not-so-sweet young ladies littered the pavements, parks and ballrooms, the sort of lady he could imagine marrying had been nowhere to be found. He would have said he was too old and too finicky, yet he was only 34, prime matrimonial age for a gentleman, and he had no physical preference in women. Short, tall, blonde or brunette were all the same to him. It was being female that counted. Soft, perfumed skin, feminine curves, and once they were beneath him, those breathy little gasps falling from luscious, parted lips. He should have been easy to please. Instead, he'd discovered he couldn't bear the company of young ladies for longer than 5 minutes. Beyond that, he grew so bored he had difficulty